The rain was coming down hard that September morning when Lisa first saw him standing in the lobby of her law office. Tall, quiet, with eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. She didn't want a bodyguard. The whole idea felt ridiculous to her. "I can take care of myself," she had told her law partners just the day before, but the threatening letters had been piling up on her desk for weeks now. Nasty words written by people who didn't like the cases she was taking. People who thought she should mind her own business instead of helping families who needed legal protection. Lisa was 34 years old and had spent her entire career fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. She represented families trying to stay together, workers who weren't being treated fairly, and anyone else who needed someone to stand up for them in court. It was the kind of work that made some people angry. David was 29 and had served his country for 8 years. 3 times he had been sent overseas and 3 times he had come back home changed. Now he was trying to figure out how to live a normal life again, but nothing felt normal anymore. Taking this security job was supposed to be simple. Just watch over someone, make sure they stayed safe, collect a paycheck. Easy enough. But nothing about Lisa seemed simple. She came from a world of nice offices and expensive coffee, where people wore suits that cost more than David made in a month. Her father was a doctor. Her mother taught at the university. She had grown up with opportunities that David could only dream about. While she was studying law at fancy schools, he was learning how to survive in places where one wrong move could get you killed. The first day was awkward for both of them. Lisa kept trying to leave him behind, walking fast through the parking garage or slipping out of meetings early. She would look over her shoulder and sigh when she saw him following at a respectful distance. "Do you really have to come everywhere with me?" she asked during lunch break, stirring her salad without taking a bite. "That's what they're paying me to do," David replied simply. He wasn't much for small talk, and he could see that his presence made her uncomfortable. Fair enough. Most people felt that way around him these days. The truth was, David was fighting his own battles. Some nights he couldn't sleep, his mind racing with memories from overseas. Other nights he would wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for weapons that weren't there. This job was supposed to help him get back on track, give him something normal to focus on. But watching Lisa work, seeing how passionate she was about helping people, reminded him of why he had wanted to serve in the first place. She spent 14-hour days preparing cases, often working through lunch because some family was depending on her to keep them together. She took phone calls from scared people at all hours of the day and night. One evening, as they walked to her car after another long day, Lisa finally spoke to him about something other than schedules and security. "Why did you take this job?" she asked, fumbling with her keys in the dim parking garage lighting. David thought about it for a moment. "Seemed like the right thing to do," he said. "Help someone who's helping other people." She looked at him differently after that. Not like he was just some guy following her around, but like maybe he understood what she was trying to accomplish. The threatening messages kept coming. They arrived by mail, email, and sometimes people would call her office just to tell her they didn't appreciate what she was doing. Lisa tried to act like it didn't bother her, but David could see the way her hands shook slightly when she read them. How she would lock her office door before opening the mail each morning. David started paying closer attention to everything around them. Who was in the parking garage when they arrived? Which cars had been there all day? Whether anyone seemed to be watching them? His military training was kicking in, even though he tried to tell himself this was just a regular job. He began checking her car every morning before she got in. Looking under the hood, checking the tires, making sure nobody had messed with anything overnight. Lisa thought he was being paranoid. "Nothing's going to happen," she would say. "People just like to talk big. They're not actually going to do anything." But David had seen what happened when people stopped taking threats seriously. He had been to places where the wrong person saying the wrong thing at the wrong time meant everyone was in danger. Maybe Lisa's world was different, but angry people were angry people everywhere. As the weeks went by, something started to change between them. Lisa began asking for his opinion on security matters. Where should she park? Which entrance should they use? Was it safe to stay late at the office? David's answers were always careful and professional, but she could tell he was really thinking about how to keep her safe. She also started noticing things about him, how he never complained, even when she had to work 16-hour days. How he always held doors for everyone, not just her. How he was polite to the cleaning staff and remembered the names of the security guards in the building. One Friday afternoon, as they were getting ready to leave for the weekend, Lisa found a brick on her office floor. The window behind her desk was completely broken, glass scattered everywhere. Attached to the brick was a piece of paper with words that made her stomach drop. "Stop helping them or you'll need more than a guard." David was beside her in seconds, his whole demeanor changing. This wasn't the quiet guy who followed her around anymore. This was someone who had dealt with real danger before. "Don't touch anything," he said, already on his phone. "We need to call this in right away." As Lisa stood there looking at the broken glass and reading those threatening words over and over, she realized something that scared her more than any brick through any window. She was starting to depend on David being there, and that meant both of their lives were about to get a lot more complicated. After the brick incident, everything changed. Lisa tried to act like it was no big deal, but David could see she was shaken up. She started looking over her shoulder more often and checking her phone every few minutes like she was expecting bad news. The police had come and taken pictures of the broken window, filed a report, and basically told her to be careful. That was it. David wasn't impressed with their response, but he didn't say anything. He had learned to keep his opinions about law enforcement to himself. What bothered him more was how quickly they seemed to dismiss the whole thing. Like someone throwing a brick through a lawyer's window was just another Tuesday in the city. But David had been trained to look for patterns, and he was starting to see one. The threatening letters weren't random. They all used similar language, came on the same type of paper, and had little details that suggested they weren't written by different people having the same angry thoughts. Someone was organizing this campaign against Lisa, and that someone had just escalated from words to actions. David started showing up to work earlier and staying later. He began taking different routes to and from the office, never the same path 2 days in a row. When Lisa asked why they were taking the long way around, he just said he liked to mix things up. But late at night, when Lisa had finally gone home, David would sit in his car outside her apartment building. Not because anyone was paying him to do overtime, but because something in his gut told him the brick was just the beginning. He was right. 2 weeks later, Lisa came out to the parking garage to find her car sitting lower than usual. All 4 tires had been slashed, and someone had poured something sticky and foul-smelling all over her windshield. "This is getting ridiculous," she said, trying to sound annoyed instead of scared. But David could hear the tremor in her voice. He walked around the car slowly, taking pictures with his phone from every angle. Then he got down on his hands and knees and looked underneath the vehicle. What he found made his blood run cold. Someone had cut the brake lines. Not completely, but enough that they would fail after a few miles of driving. If Lisa had gotten in that car and driven home like any normal day, she probably wouldn't have made it. "We're calling the police," David said, his voice harder than Lisa had ever heard it. "Again? What are they going to do? Take more pictures and tell us to be careful?" David was already dialing. "This isn't just harassment anymore. Someone tried to hurt you today. Really hurt you." The police response was about what David expected. They took their pictures, filed another report, and suggested that maybe Lisa should consider taking some time off work until things cooled down. "I'm not running away from people who want to scare me into silence," Lisa said firmly. "That's exactly what they want." David admired her courage, but he was starting to worry that her determination might get her killed. That night, he didn't go home at all. He parked across the street from her building and kept watch until morning. Over the next few weeks, David started doing his own investigation. He had friends from his military days who knew how to find information that regular people couldn't access. Phone records, social media accounts, connections between different groups of people who might have reasons to target someone like Lisa. What he found wasn't what he expected. The threats weren't coming from random angry individuals. They were part of an organized effort by a group that had been watching Lisa for months. They had detailed information about her schedule, her cases, even her personal habits. Someone had been following her long before David came into the picture. Even more disturbing, some of the online discussions about Lisa included comments that suggested the group had connections inside local law enforcement. People who could access information about police reports, maybe even influence how seriously those reports were taken. David realized why the police response had been so casual. Someone might be making sure these incidents weren't treated as the serious threats they actually were. He tried to explain this to Lisa without sounding paranoid, but it was hard to make someone understand that the system they trusted might not be working in their favor. "You think the police are involved?" Lisa asked, sitting in her office late one evening. "I think some people in the police might be sympathetic to whoever's doing this," David said carefully. "Which means we can't count on getting help from the usual places." Lisa was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the question David had been dreading. "So what do we do?" David had been thinking about that question every night for the past month. The answer wasn't simple, and it wasn't something he could handle by just following Lisa around during business hours. "We get smarter," he said. "We start thinking like this is a real threat instead of just some people trying to scare you." That meant changing everything about how Lisa lived her daily life. Different routes, different schedules, different ways of communicating. It meant David learning everything he could about the people who wanted to hurt her, and staying one step ahead of whatever they were planning next. It also meant accepting that this job had become something much more serious than either of them had signed up for. David wasn't just protecting Lisa from random threats anymore. He was preparing for a war that someone else had already declared. The question was whether they would be ready when the real battle started. December brought cold weather and darker evenings, but it also brought something Lisa hadn't expected, a sense of normalcy. The threats had quieted down over the past few weeks, and she was starting to think maybe the worst was over. David wasn't so sure. In his experience, when dangerous people went quiet, it usually meant they were planning something bigger. But he kept his concerns to himself and focused on the job at hand. Lisa had decided to host a dinner party at her house for some fellow lawyers she worked with. It was something she did every year around the holidays, a chance to relax and catch up with colleagues away from the stress of court cases and client meetings. "You don't need to stay for the whole thing," she told David while they were planning the evening. "It's just going to be boring lawyer talk and too much wine." But David had already made up his mind. If Lisa was going to be in one place with a bunch of people for several hours, that made her an easy target. He would be there, whether she thought it was necessary or not. The day of the party, David arrived at Lisa's house early to check everything out. Her neighborhood was nice, quiet streets with big trees and houses set back from the road. The kind of place where people felt safe leaving their doors unlocked and their windows open. That made David nervous. Safe neighborhoods made people careless, and careless people were easy targets. He walked around the entire house, checking all the doors and windows, looking for places someone might try to get in. He noted which houses had lights on, which cars belonged in the neighborhood, and where someone could park if they didn't want to be seen. Lisa watched him through the kitchen window as he paced around her backyard, and she couldn't decide if she felt safer or more worried seeing how seriously he was taking everything. The guests started arriving around 6 in the evening. David recognized a few faces from Lisa's office, but most were people he had never seen before. Lawyers, judges, a few people who worked for the city government. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy to be there. David positioned himself where he could see the front door, the back door, and most of the windows. He stayed far enough away that he wouldn't intrude on the conversations, but close enough that he could react quickly if something went wrong. Around 8 o'clock, while Lisa was in the kitchen getting more food ready, David's phone buzzed with a text message from someone he didn't recognize. The message was short and made his stomach drop. "Nice party. Would hate for anything to happen to those nice people." David immediately stepped outside and called the number, but it went straight to voicemail. He started walking around the house again, this time looking for anything that seemed different from when he had checked earlier. That's when he saw them. 2 men sitting in a dark car parked 3 houses down, just close enough to see Lisa's house but far enough away that most people wouldn't notice. They had been there for at least 20 minutes, but David was sure they hadn't been there when the party started. He called a friend who worked for federal law enforcement, someone he had served with overseas who now investigated organized crime groups. "I need a favor," David said quietly into the phone. "I think something bad is about to happen, and I can't trust local police to handle it." While he was on the phone, David saw a third man walking down the street, moving slowly like he was just out for an evening stroll. But David noticed he was wearing all dark clothes and had something bulky under his jacket. The federal agents arrived faster than David had hoped, but they came without sirens or flashing lights. Just two unmarked cars that pulled up quietly and parked where they could watch both the suspicious vehicles and Lisa's house. David went back inside to find Lisa laughing with her guests, completely unaware of what was happening outside. Part of him wanted to warn her, but he didn't want to panic everyone at the party unless he was absolutely sure there was immediate danger. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his federal contact. Three men in tactical gear just got out of a van 2 blocks away. "They're armed and moving toward the house. We're moving in now." David's training took over. He calmly walked over to Lisa and whispered in her ear, "I need everyone to move away from the windows right now. Don't panic, just get everyone into the center of the house." Lisa looked at his face and knew this wasn't a drill. She started casually suggesting that everyone move to the dining room to see some artwork she had recently bought. No one suspected anything was wrong. Outside, David could hear car doors slamming and people shouting commands. The federal agents had intercepted the 3 armed men before they could reach the house, but it was close. Too close. Within an hour it was over. 3 men in custody, weapons confiscated, and a very detailed plan discovered that showed they had intended to break into Lisa's house during the party. The plan included detailed information about who would be there, what time they usually left, and how they intended to get everyone to stay quiet while they took care of their main target. Lisa sat in her living room afterwards, surrounded by empty wine glasses and half-eaten appetizers, trying to process what had almost happened to her and her friends. "They were really going to hurt people," she said, more to herself than to David. "They were going to hurt you," David replied. "Everyone else would have just been in the way." The federal investigation that followed revealed that the group targeting Lisa was much larger and more organized than anyone had realized. They had been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity when she would be predictable and surrounded by people they could use to control her. Lisa realized that without David's quick thinking and his connections to people who could actually help, the evening could have ended very differently. Not just for her, but for everyone who had come to her house expecting nothing more dangerous than too much wine and boring conversation about legal cases. For the first time since this whole thing started, Lisa understood that someone really was trying to kill her. And for the first time, she realized that David might be the only thing standing between her and people who would stop at nothing to silence her forever. January brought snow and a phone call that changed everything. David was sitting in Lisa's office reading through security reports when his boss from the security company called with news he had been expecting, but dreading. "We're pulling you off this assignment," his boss said without any introduction. "This situation has gotten too dangerous for our company to handle. We can't risk having one of our people get hurt on a job like this." David looked across the room at Lisa, who was on her own phone call with a client, completely focused on helping someone navigate a complicated legal problem. She had no idea that her protection was about to disappear. "What about Lisa?" David asked quietly. "We'll assign someone else. Someone with less personal investment in the case." That phrase hit David hard. Personal investment. His boss was right, of course. Somewhere along the way, protecting Lisa had stopped being just a job and had become something much more important to him. After the dinner party incident, David had realized something that scared him. The people threatening Lisa weren't going to give up. The federal arrests had only made them angrier, more determined. And the security company, focused on liability and insurance costs, wanted to assign him to some nice, safe corporate executive who faced nothing more dangerous than angry shareholders. That evening, David sat in his small apartment staring at the official letter that would end his assignment with Lisa. He thought about his 8 years in the military, about all the times he had wondered what he was really fighting for. Now, he knew. He was fighting for people like Lisa, people who stood up for others even when it put them in danger, people who wouldn't back down just because someone told them to be quiet. The next morning, David walked into Lisa's office and quit his job. "I don't understand," Lisa said, looking confused and a little hurt. "Did something happen? Did I do something wrong?" "The security company is pulling me off your case," David explained. "They think it's too dangerous for their business reputation." Lisa sat down heavily in her chair. "So they're sending someone else?" "They're sending someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know the people threatening you, and doesn't understand how serious this has become," David said. "Someone who will follow their company rules instead of doing whatever it takes to keep you safe." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question David had been hoping she would ask. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should let me keep protecting you," David said. "Not as an employee of some security company, but as someone who believes in what you're doing and wants to make sure you can keep doing it." What David didn't tell Lisa was how much this job had changed his life. For months after coming back from overseas, he had struggled to find purpose in civilian life. Nothing seemed to matter the way military service had mattered. But protecting Lisa, seeing how her work helped families stay together and gave people hope when they had nowhere else to turn, had given him a reason to get up every morning. Lisa tried to talk him out of it. She couldn't pay him what the security company had been paying. She couldn't provide health insurance or backup support if something went wrong. And most importantly, she couldn't live with herself if something happened to him because he was trying to protect her. But David had already made up his mind. He used his military savings to rent a small office space across from Lisa's building, where he could monitor who was coming and going. He reached out to other veterans he had served with, people who understood the importance of the mission and were willing to help without asking too many questions about official authorization. He also started doing something that worried Lisa when she found out about it. He began actively investigating the group that was threatening her, not just reacting to their moves, but trying to stay ahead of them. David spent his evenings in internet cafes and libraries, using skills he had learned in military intelligence to track down information about the people who wanted to hurt Lisa. He found their social media accounts, their meeting places, even their real names and addresses. What he discovered made him realize that Lisa was in even more danger than they had thought. The group wasn't just angry about her current cases. They saw her as a symbol of everything they opposed. And they had made her elimination a priority for their entire organization. Even worse, David learned that they had put a price on Lisa's head. Not just a threat or a warning, but an actual reward for anyone who could get to her. That meant they weren't just dealing with one organized group anymore, but potentially with anyone desperate enough to try to claim that reward. When David shared this information with Lisa, he saw something in her eyes change. Not fear exactly, but a deep understanding of how serious her situation had become. "Maybe I should take some time off," she said quietly. "Go visit family in another state until this blows over." "It's not going to blow over," David replied. "These people have made this personal. Taking a vacation won't change that." Lisa looked out her office window at the city where she had spent her entire career fighting for justice. "So what do we do?" David had been thinking about that question every night for weeks. The answer wasn't something they taught in security training manuals. "We end this," he said simply. "We find a way to stop them before they hurt you or anyone else." What David didn't tell Lisa was that he had already started making preparations for a confrontation he knew was coming. He had identified the group's leaders, their usual patterns, and the places where they felt most comfortable operating. He had also accepted something that Lisa didn't know yet. When that confrontation came, he was prepared to do whatever it took to make sure she survived, even if that meant he might not. April arrived with spring flowers and what should have been a routine trip to the courthouse. Lisa had an important hearing that morning, and despite David's concerns about maintaining predictable schedules, some things couldn't be avoided. They had developed a system over the past few months. Different routes, different times, always watching for anything that seemed out of place. David had taught Lisa to notice the same things he noticed. Cars that appeared too often, people who seemed to be paying too much attention, situations that felt wrong even when nothing obvious was happening. That morning, everything felt wrong. David noticed it first in the parking garage at Lisa's apartment. A van that had been there the night before was gone, but there was an oil stain where it had been parked, suggesting it had been there for a long time. Someone had been watching Lisa's building for days, maybe weeks. On the drive to the courthouse, David saw the same dark sedan make 3 turns behind them. When he took an unexpected detour through a residential neighborhood, the sedan followed. When he doubled back toward the main road, it stayed with them. "We're not going to court today," David said quietly, reaching for his phone. "I have to," Lisa replied. "This hearing has been scheduled for months. If I don't show up, my client loses everything." David understood her dedication, but he also understood what was happening around them. The people who wanted to hurt Lisa had finally decided to make their move, and they had chosen a time when she would be predictable and vulnerable. "Call the court," David said. "Tell them you have a family emergency." But before Lisa could reach for her phone, David saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 more vehicles had appeared ahead of them, positioned to block their path forward. Behind them, the sedan was closing in fast. They were trapped. David had been in situations like this before, but never with someone he cared about sitting next to him. In the military, everyone in his unit had been trained to handle combat situations. Lisa was a lawyer who spent her days in courtrooms, not someone who should ever have to face what was about to happen. "Get down," David said, his voice completely calm despite what they were facing. "Stay down no matter what happens." The first shots came from the car behind them. David heard the back window explode and felt pieces of glass hit the back of his neck. He yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, sending their car up onto the sidewalk and around the vehicles that had been trying to block them. But the people who had planned this ambush knew what they were doing. As soon as David got around the first roadblock, another vehicle appeared from a side street, moving fast enough to ensure a collision. David had less than 2 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether both of them lived or died. He could try to avoid the collision, which would probably save his life but leave Lisa exposed to the people shooting at them from behind. Or he could make sure the other vehicle hit his side of the car instead of Lisa's side. He chose Lisa. The impact was worse than anything David had experienced, even in combat zones. The other vehicle hit them going at least 50 miles per hour, crushing the driver's side of their car and sending them spinning across an intersection. David felt his ribs break and something warm running down his face, but he could still move his arms and legs. More importantly, he could hear Lisa crying, which meant she was alive and conscious. The people who had orchestrated the ambush weren't finished. David saw 2 men getting out of the vehicles that had been following them, both carrying weapons and moving toward their wrecked car. David managed to get his door open, even though it took every bit of strength he had left. He positioned himself between the approaching men and the side of the car where Lisa was trapped, using his body as a shield. "Stay in the car," he told Lisa. "No matter what happens, don't get out until the police arrive." What happened next took less than 5 minutes but felt like hours. David, badly injured and without any weapon except his military training, held off 2 armed attackers long enough for other people to call for help and for police to respond to reports of shots fired. He took 2 bullets during those 5 minutes, one in his shoulder and one in his leg, but he never stopped protecting Lisa, never moved away from his position between her and the people trying to get to her. When police finally arrived, they found David unconscious on the ground next to the car, and Lisa holding pressure on his wounds with her jacket, crying and telling him he was going to be okay. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of what they had been facing. The group that had been threatening Lisa had spent months planning this attack, recruiting people from several different states, and gathering detailed information about her daily routines. They had intended to eliminate David first, knowing that he was the biggest obstacle to reaching Lisa. Then they planned to take her to a remote location where they could make an example of her that would warn other lawyers not to take cases that challenged their beliefs. David spent 3 months in the hospital, Lisa visited him every single day, sometimes bringing work with her so she could sit in his room while he slept. She had hired the best doctors money could buy and made sure he had everything he needed for recovery. But some injuries don't heal completely. David would always walk with a limp from the leg wound, and his shoulder would never have full range of motion again. The security career he had been building was over. What wasn't over was the friendship that had developed between them. Lisa offered David a job working for her law firm, helping other attorneys who faced threats for the work they did. She also helped him start a nonprofit organization that provided security training for people who worked in civil rights law. David discovered that he was good at teaching other people how to stay safe while doing dangerous but important work. His military experience, combined with what he had learned protecting Lisa, made him uniquely qualified to help people who were trying to make the world a better place but needed someone to watch their backs while they did it. Years later, when people asked David if he regretted his decision to quit the security company and protect Lisa on his own terms, his answer was always the same. "Some things are worth fighting for," he would say. "And some people are worth protecting, no matter what it costs you." Lisa continued her civil rights work, but she never forgot the man who had literally put his life on the line to make sure she could keep helping families stay together and giving hope to people who needed someone to fight for them. Their story became a reminder that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about caring so much about something bigger than yourself that you're willing to face whatever dangers come with standing up for what's right.